Okay, we just got done reading the first half of the chapter. We're reading about the Grand High Witch, and our narrator just asked his grandmother, "What is a witchophile, Grandmama?" "A person who studies witches and knows a lot about them," my grandmother said. "Are you a witchophile, Grandmama?" "I'm a retired witchophile," she said. "I'm too old to be active any longer. But when I was young, I traveled all around the globe trying to track down the Grand High Witch. I never even came close to succeeding." "Is she rich?" I asked. "She's rolling," my grandmother said. "Simply rolling in money. Rumor has it that there is a machine in her headquarters which is exactly like the machine the government uses to print the banknotes you and I use. After all, banknotes are only bits of paper with special designs and pictures on them. Anyone can make them who has the right machine and the right paper. My guess is that the Grand High Witch makes all the money she wants and she dishes it out to witches everywhere." "What about foreign money?" I asked. "Those machines can make Chinese money if you want them to," my grandmother said. "It's only a question of pressing the right buttons." "But Grandmama," I said, "if anybody has ever seen the Grand High Witch, and nobody knows what she looks like, how can you be sure she exists?" My grandmother gave me a long and very severe look. "Nobody has ever seen the devil," she said, "but we know he exists." The next morning we sailed for England, and soon I was back in the old family house in Kent, but this time with only my grandmother to look after me. Then the Easter term began, and every weekday I went to school, and everything seemed to have come back to normal again. Now at the bottom of our garden there was an enormous conker tree, and high up in its branches Timmy, my best friend, and I had started to build a magnificent treehouse. We were able to work on it only on the weekends, but we were getting along fine. We had begun with the floor, which we built by laying wide planks between two quite far apart branches and nailing them down. Within a month, we had finished the floor. Then we constructed a wooden railing around the floor that left only the roof to be built. The roof was a bit difficult. One Saturday afternoon, when Timmy was in bed with flu, I decided to make a start on the roof all by myself. It was lovely being high up there in that conker tree all alone, with the pale young leaves coming out everywhere around me. It was like being in a big green cave. And the height made it extra exciting. My grandmother had told me that if I fell I would break a leg, and every time I looked down I got a tingle along my spine. I worked away, nailing the first plank on the roof. Then suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a woman standing immediately below me. She was looking up at me and smiling in the most peculiar way. When most people smile, their lips go out sideways. This woman's went upwards and downwards, showing all her front teeth and gums. The gums were like raw meat. It always is a shock to discover that you are being watched when you think you are alone. And what was this strange woman doing in our garden anyway? I noticed that she was wearing a small black hat, and she had black gloves on her hands, and the gloves came nearly up to her elbows. Gloves. She was wearing gloves. I froze all over. "I have a present for you," she said, still staring at me, still smiling, still showing her teeth and gums. I didn't answer. Here's a picture of our narrator working in the treehouse that he's building there. "Come down out of that tree, little boy," she said, "and I shall give you the most exciting present you've ever had." Her voice had a curious, rasping quality. It made a sort of metallic sound, as though her throat was full of drawing pins. Without taking her eyes from my face, she very slowly put one of those gloved hands into her purse and drew out a small green snake. She held it up for me to see. "It's tame," she said. All right, here's our narrator in the tree. There he is, hanging onto the branch, peering down here at what he describes the lady as looking like. Oops, sorry, that's a little hard for me to get you seeing it there. There we go. There's the snake. The snake began to coil itself around her forearm. It was brilliant green. "If you come down here, I shall give him to you," she said. "Oh, Grandmama," I thought, "come and help me." Then I panicked. I dropped the hammer and shot up that enormous tree like a monkey. I didn't stop until I was as high as I could possibly go, and there I stayed, quivering with fear. I couldn't see the woman now. There were layers and layers of leaves between her and me. I stayed up there for hours, and I kept very still. It began to grow dark. At last I heard my grandmother calling my name. "I'm up here," I shouted back. "Come down at once," she called out. "It's past your supper time." "Grandmama," I shouted, "has that woman gone?" "What woman?" my grandmother called back. "The woman in the black gloves." There was silence from below. It was the silence of somebody who was too stunned to speak. "Grandmama," I shouted again, "has she gone?" "Yes," my grandmother answered at last. "She's gone. I'm here, my darling. I'll look after you. You can come down now." I climbed down. I was trembling. My grandmother enfolded me in her arms. "I've seen a witch," I said. "Come inside," she said. "You'll be all right with me." She led me into the house and gave me a cup of hot cocoa with lots of sugar in it. "Tell me everything," she said. I told her. By the time I had finished, it was my grandmother who was trembling. Her face was ashy gray, and I saw her glance down at that hand of hers that didn't have a thumb. "You know what this means," she said. "It means that there is one of them in our district. From now on, I'm not letting you walk alone from school." "Do you think she could be after me, specially?" I asked. "No," she said. "I doubt that. One child is good as any other to those creatures." It is hardly surprising that after that I became a very witch-conscious little boy. If I happened to be alone on the road and saw a woman approaching who was wearing gloves, I would quickly skip across to the other side. And as the weather remained pretty cold during the whole of that month, nearly everybody was wearing gloves. Curiously enough, though, I never saw the woman with the dark green or with the green snake again. That was my first witch, but it wasn't my last. All right, friends, that's the end of the chapter about the Grand High Witch, and I think we even got a little bit of surprise in that chapter that we weren't expecting. So I've got 3 questions for you. The first and second one should be pretty easy. The last one says to summarize, so I'll talk a little bit about what I'm looking for that question once we get there. For the first question, number 1 is, who is the Grand High Witch? And we actually talked about that in the first set of videos for this section. So if you're going to look back into the video, you're going to have to watch back in the middle of that first one in order to get the answer for that. And remember, you need to write in complete sentences if you're submitting this, because this is for bonus points. And like I said before, if this isn't your very best work, you're not going to be able to receive those bonus points. I've only got a couple of people who have submitted. You actually have to submit by the deadline that I give in order for me to give those bonus points to you. And each week you can earn up to 4. So for these 3 questions, you would earn 2 if you did them appropriately. And if you do the reflection question at the beginning, you can earn 2 points potentially if you didn't do them appropriately. So you can earn up to 4 points a week. I usually give the opportunity for about 8. So, yeah. The second question is, what is a witchophile? And you'd watch the beginning of the second video to find that answer. What is a witchophile? And then the third question is the one that I said talks about summarizing. And it says, summarize the narrator's first encounter with a witch. Now remember, the narrator is the boy who's telling the story. So when it says to summarize, it just means in a couple of sentences, tell about it. It doesn't want you to say word for word what the story said. It wants you, in your own words, to kind of shorten that up and just give the most important details about what happened when the narrator first encountered his first witch. So those are the three questions. Remember, you need to make sure that you number them. I'd like you to title this one Grand High Witch so that I know that it's for this chapter. And you'll need to submit that by the deadline that I gave your parents in Class Dojo. And that will be Friday by 3 o'clock. So let me know if you have any questions or if anything is confusing for you. Feel free to go back and watch these 2 videos again. And our next chapter is going to be called Summer Holidays.